do is chat with you for a few minutes about both kind of what I've seen over the last several years, working with tribes, working with others, go through a little bit about where RUS is today and some of the opportunities that we have, not just at RUS, but throughout the federal government. Shouldn't take too terribly long, and then take whatever questions that you might have. And I think the best place to start, as Godfrey pointed out, was yesterday at Toto, where essentially we flew in, we got in a car, and we started driving. Then we drove some more. Then we drove some more, because that's how you get to Toto. They got a round 3 award to connect several different villages inside of the reservation. And we were within 50 miles or so of the border. And we walked around, going to the different villages where there was often several miles between the villages, looking at the conditions, seeing where the lines had to come, pointing out, here's where the tower is, this is where the fiber is being run, here are the conditions that we see, here's where the drops are, going through that village by village within the reservation. And it also put me in mind of last week. So last week, I was in Oregon. I talked to Lisa from the Siletz tribe. She told me so much about what her tribe had been through, how they were trying to address their pieces, that their land had been taken from them, that they were working to get pieces of it back, and that they were struggling, even as they were making progress, to figure out how they provided high-speed internet to people in their tribe. And so one of the things that we were trying to figure out is how could we work within the existing RUS regulations to make sure that we can address the needs that they have. And so as I was coming over here this morning, I was thinking about these 3 different tribes that I mentioned this morning, the Mescalero Apache, Tono Odo, and the Siletz tribes, and what different places they're in. And so the lesson that I always take from this is that, kind of when you've seen one situation, and it's often hard to think, well, we can address all the different needs with just this one thing, and to make sure that we address the different needs of all the different tribal communities around the country to ensure that we get high-speed internet to everyone, because it is complicated. Indian country has been neglected purposefully from this world, and we have to do everything possible to make sure that we address it. Because as y'all know, President Biden has set a very ambitious goal for us. Every American will be connected to affordable, reliable, high-speed internet. Every American. And as somebody who goes to these meetings with the White House every month to talk about this goal, we mean it. We're thinking about those communities and those individuals who might be at the end of the line. I remember Billy saying yesterday, this is the end of the line when we were at a particular location, again, not far from the border. We're thinking about how we address those specific circumstances. And the funding, as y'all know, has been historic during the administration, starting with what was given to states through the American Rescue Plan, going down through all the different funding sources until $65 billion for high-speed internet in the bipartisan infrastructure law. Historic amounts of funding. So in the Rural Utility Service, which I have the good fortune to lead, last round we distributed $2.56 billion through the bipartisan infrastructure law. It's actually cut a little bit between rounds 3 and 4 to make sure that we're connecting hundreds of thousands of Americans. Many of those awards went to Indian country. So less than 200 total awards, 57 of those awards went to Indian country, and 12 of those went to tribal nations to serve their own people, enhancing sovereignty, making sure that people had a better quality of life, trying to help develop economics and higher wages throughout Indian country. This has really been a fantastic opportunity for us. On top of that, of course, making sure that Indian country was involved in the decisions that we were making, strengthening our tribal language to make sure that if something was going to be built in Indian country, that the tribe had to consent to such a thing. On top of that, we, for the first time, have been putting funding into helping all kinds of communities figure out what's best for them. So $10 million to start with for technical assistance, more to come. And that funding is really, I think, most effective when helped with kind of pre-development funds. Again, thinking about all these different communities and how we help them. Kind of, can we do it? How would we do it? Can we get RUS funding? Is our scoring going to hold up? And then ensuring that you can participate, doing all that with technical assistance. We haven't had that funding before, and we have it now. I remember last week when I was in Oregon, Lisa telling me, I don't want to be an internet provider. I don't want to be an internet service provider, but I know that nobody else is going to do it. And so I have to do it. This is what I want to do. This type of funding is helping her figure out how to take those next steps that many of you in this room have done before to ensure that she can be successful and that hopefully get an RUS award, some kind of grant, and move forward with our projects. So, so even as we sit here today, we have opportunities that are open. We've been going through another round of Community Connect funding. That's a little bit of our smaller funding opportunity. But we just recently opened up our round 5 opportunity. And I just want to take a minute to go through some of the details of that so you can know it. So Reconnect, again, that's our signature initiative through the Rural Utility Service to provide funding throughout America. In this particular round, we'll have $700 million or so to distribute. This is, again, to help people get to the hardest locations throughout our country, like where I was yesterday. Of that, $150 million will be reserved for our 100% category, which includes tribal nations and tribal governments for that. So one of the biggest advantages that tribal governments, tribal nations have when applying for RUS funding is that you can get 100% grants, which is, in this environment, of course, some of the best that you can do to get to these hardest to reach places. The second piece that I want to emphasize is that we've had a bit of a change in our criteria for where we get to. Traditionally, what has happened is to serve an area with an RUS Reconnect grant, 90% of the places that are in your service area had to be less than 100 download speed, 20 upload speed. That changed because of Congress this year, not because of something that we did, but our friends in Congress decided to make it an even more restrictive area. So 90% of the places that are in the service area have to be less than 25 download speed, 3 upload. I'll just say this one more time. We are trying to reach the hardest to reach areas. We know that often it is very financially difficult to serve those remote locations. I travel almost every week, as you can kind of tell by just the stories that I've gone through, and I see hills, mountains, water, less than 1 or fewer drops per mile. I've seen every kind of location and know that the money just doesn't work unless you get that 100% grant. And to meet President Biden's goal,
every single American. These 100% grants are helpful, but now with this further restriction and reconnect, it is really going to be those locations that don't have 25.3 in 2024 and 2025 that are going to get the funding. On top of that, we tried to make the application process easier, especially for entities that might not be as sophisticated and might not have as much funding to put in a very expensive reconnect application. I know that it is definitely not only time consuming, but requires a lot of funds just to put in an application. So we tried to do a couple things to make it easier, like you no longer have to put in 5 years of a pro forma if the tribe is going to guarantee that the project will be built. A big advantage if you want to put something in today. Also, tribes may request alternate scoring criteria if under our economic needs of the community prong. This is really important, again, to make sure that we're recognizing exactly what's going on in Indian country. And then finally, we got rid of the requirement that at the application stage that you need a legal opinion. That way you don't have to pay a law firm to do this, especially if you're not going to get an award. If you do get an award, you will have to provide such a thing, but at that point, it's a little easier to stomach getting a legal opinion if you know that you're going to get the funding. Don't have to do that at the application stage. So there's a lot going on. I know we've been announcing our digital learning and telemedicine grants recently. There's a bunch of different pieces. I also want to make sure that talk about all the different pieces that are going on at the federal government. I saw some of my friends from the tribal broadband team at NTIA. I don't know if they're in the room. I'm kind of looking around to see. They might be outside talking to people, but you have this incredible tribal broadband team and the community over at NTIA. They've got their funding opportunities. You've got broadband equity access and deployment, BEAD, coming through the states. You've got the capital projects fund, funding that came through Treasury that's going to the states to go to people. You've got RUS, the funding that we've been putting out through the Reconnect and through Community Connect to make sure that we connect every American. This is a transformative time. One of the largest public works projects that we've seen since the New Deal to make sure that fiber reaches every single American or some kind of high-speed internet resource. It makes me think of a while back when I was in Oklahoma and I was with the Pawnee Nation, and there was a guy there named Jimmy. Jimmy was telling me about how he went back to school. He was probably in his 40s or so. He went back to school because he had been telling his teenagers they had to go to college, and they had said, "Dad, why do I have to go to college? You never finish." So Jimmy decided to go back to school and make sure that he could tell his kids truthfully, "Hey, this is really important." He was a semester away from graduating when COVID hit. And once COVID hit, he didn't have high-speed internet. He couldn't finish his classes, and it delayed him another year from finishing his degree. It cost him a bunch of money, and I was there announcing a grant for Pawnee Nation to get high-speed internet. That's just unacceptable in this modern era. We know that communities can't thrive, families can't thrive. If you want to see your doctor, if you want to study, if you want to sell something that you've made, you've got to do it online. That's the reality. Indian country cannot be left out of this equation. Our administration is determined to make sure it isn't. Thank you very much for having me here today. Questions? I won't throw this.
All right, questions. Here we got one. Thank you. Hi, Mark Springer with the Chasmute Tribe in Mountain Village, Alaska. How would you describe the friendliness of the Reconnect application process for small tribes in Alaska? We don't have reservations. We've got communities of 500, 600, 1,000 people, sometimes less. Most of the Reconnect applications, the wards that have come in have gone to telcos and carriers. The application looks technically pretty, you almost got to have an engineer to help you write it. If a small community in Alaska wants to, get into the Reconnect program, are we able to?
So great question. And I want to be as honest and transparent about things as I possibly can. It's never easy filling out a government application for these things. It isn't. We got to make sure that you're going to be successful. We got to know that we're using taxpayer dollars wisely. All those reasons are why, every time somebody says make it easier, we're trying to do that. But it's challenging because we need enough information to make sure that you're successful. Let me just say a couple of things. Number one is, as you just heard, we are trying to make it easier for entities like your villages. I was in Alaska last summer, went a bunch of different all around, was in Igiugig and a bunch of different parts of Alaska, saw how remote places are and how challenged some of these communities are. I think in Igiugig, somebody told me that they were paying about $250 or more a month for, now I shouldn't say that. He said as much as $900 a month for high-speed internet through satellite, because when he had to use a lot of data, his bill would go up to several $100s. It was just draining their family for what they were trying to do. And I don't care who you are, $900 a month for internet is a lot of money, especially if you're not making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. So anyway, back to your question. So we've tried to make it easier. On top of that, we have this technical assistance piece, which we are happy to talk to you about. And then the last piece is you see Matthew and Billy over here. One of the great things about being at Rural Utility Service is that the Department of Agriculture has people throughout the country to help. And we have a general field representative to help with Alaska. And what I would love to do is just put you together with her and make sure that y'all are talking and she shows you both how it's gotten easier, what you can do, and how you can be successful. Because again, I don't want you to apply. I don't want you to spend the money unless you're going to be successful. But I do think, particularly with how the criteria has actually ratcheted up so that it's harder just to apply by the numbers. I mean, people in your service area have to be less than 25.3. That's going to put entities like your tribal nations in Alaska and other places at an advantage. And again, for 100% grant.
Great. One thing to add to that too, Andy, is the fact that when I started Muscular Apache Telecom 25 years ago, I had somebody on my back, like the GFRs here. They're making sure that I'm putting this fiber in the ground 3 feet deep. They put the standards there. We don't have a lot of standards on how to build these kind of things. There's not really any kind of a playbook which NTTA has been trying to evaluate and bring together and put together. For you to look at that, there's some minimum standards of what should be done for building out fiber networks. And these guys have a playbook that has been in play for a long time. I mean, they've done it and done it over and over. They come out and inspect the job to make sure everything's done correctly. It's like Big Brother on your back, but it's actually, he's making sure that you do it right. So I've gone through 3 loans. I've gone through A, B, and C. And the last C loan that I got built out fiber to every home on the reservation. So I have to stay within those standards, but it kind of helps us out because, like I said, there's no really way how to do this. It's like when you build your house, you try to build an electrical code into wall switches and everything else, and you don't want to get electrocuted. Same thing here. You got to rely on somebody who knows the standards of how to put these in. So industry standards for fiber, industry standards for 5 nines of reliability. You haven't heard that in a long time. But that reliability is carrier grade. You got to find this good type of equipment to be able to run that kind of networks, to be able to do 10 gigs all the time, no matter what. And the voice component of that too, make sure you be able to dial 911 in case you've got problems in the house. You can be able to do that. These are the types of standards that are being built out today. So yes, thank you. Any other questions? I got a Starbucks card if you want one, if you ask a question. All right.
Don't offer me a Starbucks gift card. Josh Snow, President of Trace Fiber Networks, Chickasaw Nation. One of the changes that came from Reconnect 4 to Reconnect 5 is a self-certification that the tribes could do in the challenge process. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, again, this is all part of feedback that we've been getting through the processes. We meet about this on a regular basis and try to understand. And so, again, I would just urge everybody, whether it's self-certification, whatever these pieces are, take a look at these changes, because we hear from people. We try to make these changes between rounds to ensure that we are meeting the needs of every entity, by the way, not just Indian country, obviously, but everybody. And our goal is to make sure that we get out these awards, get through the process, and get out these awards late summer. So I told you, whatever it is, it's April. The window is going to close here soon. We're going to evaluate all these different pieces, and we're going to start making awards late summer and fall. This is happening. It's happening quick. Make sure that you're taking a look at it.
Great. We have another question over here.
Good morning. Randy Hughes, Oglala Sioux Tribe, Oglala Lakota Telecommunications. Thank you for coming to Pine Ridge last year. We appreciate it. I think you're with NTIA back then. And thank you for the USDA Reconnect 4 grant. Our question is related to the SUDA provision, waiver of non-duplication. Could you speak to that a little bit? Because we have concerns of overlap.
Yeah, so this is a really tough place for us, because we've been told by Congress over and over again, their number one concern that they have about all this funding is overlap, that we're going to fund multiple locations at the same place. And particularly when you have, I just talked about all those different places where we're seeing funding, Treasury, NTIA, I didn't even mention FCC, us, the states. It's very complicated for us to keep track of all these pieces. And so part of what's been happening over the last few years is a dedicated and really whole of government effort to figure out how we don't have duplication. And even with the SUDA provisions, we are very reluctant, very, very reluctant to fund duplication. This is something that we're going to keep on. It's going to be very hard to make that case to us that duplication is a good thing. And so part of what we do every few weeks is we meet amongst the group and figure out what else we need to be doing, as well as the teams meeting and going through this. And so you see, particularly in Alaska, sometimes in South Dakota, other places, multiple entities circling the same areas, because these are some of the hardest to reach areas. And we're going to continue, even with SUDA, making sure that we don't fund duplication as much as possible. The last thing I'll just say is that I enjoyed being in Pine Ridge. It's another place where I drove around the entire area, saw places that talked to people who didn't have electricity, much less high-speed internet. Was so upset by and by looking at that. And then I remember a couple months later, Pine Ridge was a place where where during the winter of whatever year that was, 2022, lots of pieces of Pine Ridge went without electricity in enormous colds. I was so upset to see that, and Hope was thinking about everybody there. This is the reality of why we need up-to-date modern infrastructure everywhere throughout the country, particularly through Indian country. Yes.
Got one last question.
Hi, Brian DeMarco with SAI, the Blackfeet Nation in Montana. We're working on an application in Reconnect 5. We've had great support from Kathleen Williams in Montana and Peter Hawk, our GFR. One of the challenges, though, from 4 to 5, some of the, it is definitely tighter and it's harder for us to get 100% funded. And so the criteria is getting more difficult. And so we're kind of backed into a corner at the moment where getting transport for a fair and equitable rate. We're in a market where there's a monopoly. And so I guess how can we use the USDA resources to escalate this to maybe have some consideration as we're working through the application process?
Yeah, so great question. And many of these issues that you're facing, I'm sure, are really detailed oriented. One of the things that I feel very lucky about is that the telecom team is very customer friendly. We do try to do everything that we can to ensure that you succeed. If you tell Kathleen or whoever else that you'd like to have a conversation with leadership about that, not because they're doing a bad job, but because those are individuals who have the opportunity to look at the policy and to evaluate it in a certain way, always feel free to do that. I'm happy to give out my email. You can send me an email. I'll make sure that the conversation happens because we frequently get questions from applicants, from awardees. Can you take a look at this? This isn't working for us. We have to, of course, obey the law. We have to obey our own regulations, but we're going to try to see what we can do to help you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.